Hello lovelies, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So on today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you on how to make this inverted pleat A-line dress. If this is what you would like to make next, please keep on watching and let's get right into the video. So these are the measurements you'll be needing. You need your shoulder width, your bust line, your under bust line, front waistline, bust distance, which is the distance between one nipple to another, also called the nipple to nipple measurement. You need your bust circumference, waist circumference, hip circumference, and the desired length of your gown. I've gone ahead to fold my pattern paper and I'm going to be drafting the front pattern first. At the top of the pattern, I'm going to mark my shoulder line, which is also going to serve as my starting point. From the shoulder line, I'm going to go ahead to take all my vertical measurements. I'm marking my bust line, which is 11 inches, my under bust, which is 14 inches, and then my waistline, which is 16 inches. From my waistline, I'm going to go down by 8 inches. This is going to be my hip line. And from the shoulder line, I will go ahead to mark the length of my dress. For this, I am using 38 inches, inclusive of the hemming allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and connect all these marks into a straight line. And then I will label them accordingly. So when that is done, I'm going to go ahead and mark my neck width. For this, I'm using 3 inches. And then I also mark my shoulder line, which is 7 inches. And then on that line, on that dot, I'm going to go down by 1 inches. This is for my shoulder slants. If you know how to draft your basic bodies, this is basically what I'm doing. And then from the shoulder line, the shoulder slants, I'm going to go down and mark my armhole measurement. My armhole measurement is 8.1, but because I'm making a sleeveless dress and I want the armhole space to be firm, I minus 1 inch. So I marked 7.1 inches instead. And then I'm connecting the lines like this. Next, I'm going to mark my neckline. So I desire to use a V neckline for my dress. So you can go ahead to mark your desired neckline. So but I'm using a V neck. So I went down by 6 inches and then I used my curve rule to connect it like so because I didn't want the V neck to be very sharp. I wanted it to be a little bit curvy. Then I'm going to go ahead and mark my nipple to nipple measurements. Starting on the bust line, I'll mark it. My nipple to nipple measurement is 4 inches. I'll mark that on the bust line, the under bust line, the waistline, and down to the length of the dress. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect this into a straight line. From a simple sketch to a look for all. Laughing my mistakes, dancing every take. From the first small step to the final shape. Thread by thread, we make it step by step. And then on the bust line, I'm going to go down by 0.5 inch. And then on the under bust line, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of the line. And then I'm going to use my curve ruler to connect it in this way. And then to connect the dart leg, I'm going to connect that line into is a straight line for the dart leg. I'm going to connect it to the hip line like so. And then on the shoulder slant, measure what you have there and then find the midpoint. On the midpoint, I'm going to mark 0.5 inch on both sides. And then I'll connect the three dots to my bust line like so. Next, I'm going to mark my armhole. So on the chest line, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. My bust circumference divided by 4 is 10 inches. And then I'm going to mark it like so. And then on the armhole line, I'm going to find the midpoint by placing my tape measure like this. And then on that midpoint, I'm going to come in by 0.5 inches and then I'll connect my front armhole. And then I'm going to also go ahead and mark my waist circumference. On my waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference. My waist circumference divided by 4 is 8 inches. Once I mark that, I'm going to measure what I have, the dart intake there. I'm going to measure what I have and then I'll replace it on the waistline. And then going down to the hip line as well, I will mark my hip circumference divided by 4, which is 11.25. I'll mark that there. And then what I have on my hip line, I will also mark it on the length of the dress. So currently I'm going ahead to add my sewing allowance, which I added 1 inch on the chest line. I added 1 inch on the waistline and the hip line as well. But on the length of my dress, I added 2 inches. Remember, this is an A-line dress. So I'm first connecting the lines here before I go ahead to connect the extra sewing allowance. Then on my shoulder line, I added the joining allowance, which is 0.5 inches, and then I connected it well to the neckline. Now I'm going to determine where my pleat is going to start, and for mine I decided to, on the hip line, I decided to come up by 4 inches. This is optional. It depends on what you want. If you want yours to start on the waistline, please go ahead to do that. But for this tutorial, we are working with 4 inches. I came up by 4 inches from the hip line. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my paper, and that is it for our front pattern.
Thread by thread.
So I forgot to mention that if you are going to use a slip for this, please remember to add back the dart intake, which is 1 inches that we took out on the shoulder. Remember to add it back before cutting. Now I've gone ahead to fold my other paper for the back, and then I've marked all the measurements. I've marked the extra allowance for the zip. I marked the shoulder, the chest line, bust, under bust, waist, hip line, and just the length of my dress. I also marked my nipple to nipple measurements. So on the waistline, I'm going to go outward by 0.5 inch on both sides, exactly what I am doing. And then on the chest line, I'm going to come down by 0.5 inches. And then I'm going to go ahead to connect the dart like so. And then the dart leg, I'll connect it to the hip line. So just like I did for the front pattern, I'll come to the shoulder line to get the midpoint. And then on each side, I'll mark 0.5 inches. And then I'll connect that line to the chest line like you see me doing. So usually to avoid any sharp points, I like to use my curve ruler to make that part a little bit curved, not too curved, just a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead to mark my armhole. I'll first place my bust measurement, find the midpoint at the armhole line, and then this is my back armhole, so I'm not going to go in by 0.5 inch like I did for the front pattern. So I've marked my armhole, and then on the waistline I'm going to mark my waist measurement. Remember to always place your pattern beginning from that line. And then I marked my waist measurement and also replaced the 1 inch dart intake. And then I went ahead to mark my hip line, and then I connected it. So because of lack of space for this pattern paper, I did not add my sewing allowance on this pattern, but I made sure to add it before cutting the clothes. So in order not for me to forget while cutting my fabric, I decided to just write it that I needed to add allowance. Went ahead and added my 0.5 inch on the shoulder line for the joining, and then I marked my back neckline. For the back, I came down by 1.5 inches, and then I connected it to my cover like this. This is a round neckline. And then on my zip allowance, I'm going to shape it a little bit. But before then, I went to mark my where the pleat is going to start, just like I did for the front pattern. Came up by 4 inches from the hip line. On the waistline at the zip allowance, I divided what I had there by 2 to find the midpoint. And then I'm going to connect the lines like so in a slant form. This is to avoid your zip bulging at the back after sewing it. It will make your zip to relax well after when you're done sewing. And that is it for the back pattern. I'm going to go ahead and cut my pattern paper.
Pins in a jar, fabric on the floor. Little bit of magic behind this door. Chalk on my hands, measure, cut, and mend. Turn a small idea to a brand new trend. Thread by thread, we make it step by step. You'll see from my hands to your hands. Come and sew with me. Thread by thread, we make it start from what you own. Every stitch is a story, we create our own. Camera on me, pattern on the wall. From a simple sketch to a look for all.
After cutting that out, I went ahead to label the pattern paper like so. Now I'm going to go ahead to cut on my fabric. I've gone ahead to fold my fabric, and then I'm going to be placing the pattern paper on my fabric, and I'll be cutting on that. So you can watch closely on how I placed it and how I added allowance, the sewing allowance on the necessary places. So for the pleats, I'm using 4 inches. Depending on the amount of fabric that you have, you can decide to even go in more than that. But for me, I just have 2 yards of this fabric, so I'm trying to manage my fabric well. So, but what I did first was to extend that line, the line where the pleat is going to begin. I extended it so that it will be clear for me when I am marking. And then from the hip line, I went in by 4 inches. And that is going to be the amount that I will be needing for my pleats. I marked that also at the length of my dress, and that was where I placed the side front of my pattern. Just watch closely and you see how I am marking it. And then where the pleat is going to begin, I went up by 0.5 inches. This is going to be the sewing allowance. And then I'm placing the side front. While placing this pattern on the fabric, I am making sure that it is well aligned. None is longer than the other. Both the center front and the side fronts, they are well aligned and equal. And that is the reason why I am marking those lines. And then after placing it, I'm just going to use my pin to hold it down in place so it doesn't move when I'm cutting. And then on the dart area, I'm going to go ahead and mark 0.5 inch both for the center fronts and the side fronts. This is going to be for the joining allowance.
Pins in a jar, fabric on the floor. Little bit of magic behind this door. Chalk on my hands, measure, cut, and mend. Turn a small idea to a brand new trend. Thread by thread, we make it step by.
And after marking that, I went ahead to connect it like so. And afterwards, I went ahead to cut the fabric. That is it for the front piece. And then for the back piece, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did for the front. Place the pattern paper, make sure that it's well aligned, add the necessary allowance. Remember on the back pattern when I was cutting the pattern, when I was drafting the pattern, I did not add the sewing allowance. So I'm going to do that on the fabric. Add 1 inch from the bust, 1 inch on the waist, and then at the hemline, at the length of your dress, I added 2 inches because this is an A-line dress. So we want that A-line effect.
Pins in a jar, fabric on the floor. Little bit of magic behind this door. Chalk on my hands, measure, cut, and mend. Turn a small idea to a brand new trend. Thread by thread, we make it step by step. You'll see from my hands to your hands. Come and sew with me. Thread by thread, we make it start from what you own. Every stitch is a story, we create our own. Camera on me, pattern on the wall. From a simple sketch to a look for all. Laugh at my mistakes, dance in every take. From the first small step to the final shape. Thread by thread, we make it step by step. You'll see from my hands to your hands. Come and sew with me. Thread by thread, we make it start from what you own. Every stitch is a story, we create our own.
So now that we are done cutting fabric, next is to take this fabric to the sewing machine and then I would join them. So to sew this, I'm going to use the front pattern to demonstrate on how to sew your dart area. So this is how it should look when you are done cutting. So to sew it, I'm going to place it like so, and then I'm going to join the dart area by 0.5 inches down, and I'm going to go down by to that point where the dart is going to begin. And after joining it, this is what it looks like. This is before I ironed it. And then I'm going to sew the pleated area just like you see me demonstrating. I'll sew from that end to this end and then do the same thing for the both sides and also for the back pattern as well. So after joining it, this is what it looks like. I also went ahead to iron it and the pleat is coming out really nice. So on the area where I joined the dart, I ironed it flat like so, and I have joined the front and also the back. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut out the interfacing for the front and the back. So if you are going to be using a sleeves for this, you might still need an interfacing, but not entirely the way that I'm going to cut mine. So you can either use an interfacing or you have to pipe both the neckline and the armhole line. But for me, I'm using an interfacing to sew this.
Pins in a jar, fabric on the floor.
And then the fabric that I've cut, I'm going to place it right side facing each other, and I'm going to sew right starting from the neckline, the armhole, and then I'll sew the side. After doing that, I'll do that for the front and the back. So after joining the interfacing, this is what it looks like, though I have not ironed it here. So but I've gone ahead to iron it, and after sewing your interfacing, it is important for you to notch the curved area, which is the neckline and the armhole, so that when you turn it over, it will look clean before even ironing. So right now what I'm going to do is to join the shoulders, join the sides, and also I'm going to be attaching my zipper as well. And then I'm also going to be hemming the neckline, and afterwards I'll go ahead to give this a good press. So as you can see, this is the end product of our tutorial. This is what it looks like. I went ahead to iron it like so. And this is it for this tutorial. If you found it helpful, please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share to someone that might need this. And also don't also forget to turn on your notification bell so that you get notified anytime we post another tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and see you on my next one. Bye.